Well, good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Officer Aaron Mullen of the Community Engagement Section. And on behalf of the Scottsdale Police Department, I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's award ceremony. If you are able, we ask that you please stand with us as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Also, I acknowledge the command staff we have here today. We have Scottsdale Police Chief Jeff Walther, Scottsdale Assistant Chief Rich Slavin. We have Commander Scott Smith, Commander Tom Myers, and Commander Chris Coffey. Today we're here to recognize 16 of our officers for their quick and decisive actions that contributed directly to stabilizing the incident scenes they were called to, and in one call providing life-saving measures. The Critical Response Award recognizes 15 officers from an incident that occurred in December 2020 when they responded to several occasions in reference to a family disturbance related to a stabbing call. And they were nominated by Lieutenant Watson. The second Critical Response Award is for one of our officers who responded to a drowning call involving a child and helped perform life-saving measures that contributed directly to her survival. And that officer was nominated by Sergeant Bowles. On December 7th of 2020, our officers responded to the 9700 block of East Mountain View Road in response to a family fight call that escalated into one family member stabbing another. The suspect fled in a vehicle before officers arrived, and two of the victims drove themselves to Honor Health Shea. One of them had a serious stab wound to the face. The suspect in this case was a 25-year-old student who had become addicted to Adderall and had been acting irrationally over a couple of days leading up to this incident. The suspect's mother was alarmed by his behavior and had requested the father and older brother to assist in intervening and getting the suspect the medical help he needed. On the day of the incident, the father and brother arrived to talk to the suspect. The fight broke out and the family members attempted to restrain the suspect. He was able to grab a large kitchen knife from the butcher block in the kitchen and then stab his brother in the face. The mother and father were also injured in the incident. Officers responded to the original crime scene and dealt with a very distraught mother. Simultaneously, other officers responded to the hospital to conduct interviews with the father and brother. The brother had to undergo emergency surgery. When the officers interviewed the family members, they were hesitant to provide information out of concern for their son and the consequences he could end up incurring. Officers were extremely patient and professional with all parties involved to obtain information of potential leads to apprehend the suspect. Then Detective Mike Blasco reached out to supervisors on the scene during the initial response and began working up information on the suspect. Then police aide David Miller also attached himself to the call and began to work up associated addresses and identified one in the area that belonged to the suspect's grandparents. Officer Johnson and Officer Capone responded to the grandparents' house, but the suspect was not there. Officer Capone contacted the grandparents, and a short time later, an unrelated neighbor stated a vehicle matching the suspect's vehicle was driving erratically in the neighborhood. The suspect hit a parked vehicle in the neighborhood and then began to follow another vehicle at a very close distance. The occupants of that vehicle called the police in fear for their safety. Officer Johnson observed the suspect vehicle following that other family vehicle. Officer Johnson observed the suspect was acting very animated inside of his vehicle while he was following the other family. The two vehicles were headed toward a dead end in a parking lot near Hayden and Via Linden. With the incident information known at the time, Officer Johnson decided to position his vehicle in front of the suspect vehicle and assisted in taking him into custody, also with the assistance of Officer David Lesser. The officers and sergeants involved in this initial response successfully managed 3 separate crime scenes, highly emotional and hesitant victims, and a suspect who was acting very irrationally and appeared to be looking for more potential victims. It was the quick decisions and actions of those involved that brought this incident to a safe conclusion to all those involved, including that of the suspect. It is for these reasons that I recommend the initial responding sergeants, officers, and police aide listed for a critical response award. Thank you. Lieutenant Chris Watson. Ladies and gentlemen, the following officers are being recognized and awarded the Critical Response Award. Sergeant Nick Allenshaw. Sergeant Jason Stump. Sergeant Mike Blasco, who's not here with us today. Officer Steve Capone. Officer Alex Dyer, who's not here. Officer Adam Fernandez. Officer Andrew Gomez, who could not be here either. Officer Aaron Good, who's also not here. Officer Vince Johnson. Officer David Lesser. Officer Kyle McGee. And now Officer David Miller. Officer Chris Rose, also not present. And Officer Chris Williams, who is just there. And finally on this one was Officer Nick Woods. Ladies and gentlemen, please give this group of officers another hand. Chief, I'd like to give you a chance to speak at the beginning if you'd like to say anything about these officers here.
You guys want to go sit down, or do you want to talk? Nobody ever wants to talk. Thanks, Aaron. Just a couple things from me real quick, related to the whole award ceremony and how we're doing this now. As you can see, this is from December of 20, so we've held on to this one for a little while. We've held on to all of them for a little while because we'd rather do these in person than just to have them show up and drop them off in a briefing for you. They're important. The things that we're doing, that you're doing, day in and day out, are important, and we want to recognize that in person. So this is a whole new swing for us, a whole new format. In fact, this is only the second time that we've done this, and this is kind of the format for us moving forward. Is that the nomination will go to the awards board, and then it'll get voted on, and as soon as it's done, then we'll schedule it. We'll do it in a format. We'll come to you. Chiefs will come to you. We'll stream it, so if your families want to watch it, they can do that as well. But we want to recognize the great work that you're all doing in a very timely fashion. Now that the pandemic, I was going to say, seems to be over, because now that there's war going on, it seems to be over, and our buildings are open again, and it's kind of, life has moved on, which is great for us, so that we can see each other more in person and recognize you for this great work. The irony is not lost on me that today I sat with two of our new officers who graduated the academy on Friday, and I was fortunate enough to give them their badges on Friday at their graduation. But we talked about this. We talked about what we do, how we do it, the commitment we have to the community, and how, regardless of a narrative that goes on about law enforcement in our country right now, we have men and women who come forward and they say, I want to do that. I want to protect people in an hour of need, and you protected people in an hour of need and took the suspect into custody, sometimes at your own peril, right? And so that's what's important, is that every time, and I know all of you. We've spent a lot of time, in my career here with one another, and so my worry is, and this is for those people watching and live streaming and talking about this, about law enforcement today. My worry is that as I look at your faces, there are fewer and fewer and fewer people who seem to want to do this job. That's a little frightening. If you let that set in, right? That's a little frightening that there are fewer and fewer people like you, or who possess the moral courage to come forward and do this, to stand on behalf of other people when they're not able to stand for themselves like you did on this night, right? And if there are fewer and fewer of you out there, fewer and fewer of us out there, I shudder to think what's going to happen to our society, because nights like this one that you put yourself in harm's way, or we're going to talk about Officer Dittman and helping a young girl survive a drowning. Without us, who's going to do those things? Who's going to stand when others can't stand for themselves? And so that's what we do, and that's what I told these two young officers who just started with us about how important that is, to follow in the footsteps of people that came before and are still doing great work. Still doing great work with the heart of a servant on behalf of our population, our citizenry, our business owners, the visitors that come here. This is what we do, and this is a calling. And so I just want to thank you, and I'm going to thank Don ahead of time for all the great work that we do every day. It's like the unsung heroes, right? People don't know what we do until something like this happens. They just think, the police are there. Behind me is just a traffic stop. Well, that's not all we do. We spend time in the service of other people, doing right by them, standing for them, and helping them on what is essentially the worst day of their lives. And so to get the Critical Incident Award is something you should be proud of. But I have a sneaking suspicion that you're like, hey Chief, can you just stop talking so I can go back to work? Because that's what a heart of a servant is. They're like, no, this is just what I do. Isn't this what we're all supposed to do? The answer is yes. But what you don't realize sometimes is that very few people want to come forward and do that. And so I very much appreciate you as the chief. I appreciate you as a citizen of this city, and as a law enforcement professional for me for almost 28 years. I just thank you for your service and wanting to stay and work and stand on behalf of those people who cannot, and continue to do great things. So, Aaron, on to you. Thank you.
Okay, for our second Critical Response Award, on July 3rd of 2021, at about 11:50 a.m., a call was broadcast for a juvenile drowning in progress. Officer Dittman arrived with Officer Valenzuela and the Scottsdale Fire Department to a house located in the 7700 block of East Portland Street. Upon arrival, officers and fire personnel found a 2-year-old girl unresponsive and in a life-threatening medical condition. It was reported she had been in the pool for up to 6 minutes. Fire personnel asked Officer Dittman to begin life-saving compressions on the girl while they set up their equipment. Without hesitation and because of his training, he immediately began life-saving compressions on the young girl. Officer Dittman and fire personnel continued life-saving efforts until she was transported from the scene to Honor Health Osborne and then flown to the Children's Hospital in critical condition. Miraculously, the young girl made a full recovery, even after being in the pool without air for upwards of 6 minutes. There is no doubt that Officer Dittman's critical response to the scene and acting without hesitation to assist fire ultimately led to the girl's full recovery and a grateful family. Next Critical Response Award goes to Officer Donald Dittman. He's being recognized and awarded for his decisive actions and life-saving efforts that saved a young girl from becoming a drowning victim.
No comments. Yeah, it's since we talked about the critical response for the larger group, Don, I'm telling you, you're the poster child for. Give me this thing, and I can just walk out and I can go back to work. And that is so you, and I just think it so speaks to a lot of police professionals who are like, I didn't get into this for any recognition. I got into this to do right by people, and you did right. You could not do more right by this young girl, and she's alive today because of your work and the work of Scottsdale Fire on that call. And so there's just nothing cooler than that. And the humility that you and all of you bring to this is like, come on, Chief, just be done. Hand me the stuff so I can get out and I can go home or I can go back to work. It's fantastic, and it speaks to, You know, as a narrative, sometimes it gets out there about, you know, the police are bad, or they did this, or they did that. Nothing, as you well know, can be further from the truth. When I think of the finest people in our society, people who stand for others, people who protect and serve others, that's you, Don. That's all of you. That's those people who say, I want to do that. And so, kudos to all of you, and thanks for taking the time out of your day. I know we have some that are on different calls that can't make it right now because we're a busy police department. So we have some folks out on the road doing a lot of great things. But thanks for taking time out of your day. Thanks for those watching on live today, taking time out of your day. Very much appreciate it. Aaron?
Thank you, Chief. That concludes this afternoon's award ceremony. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for taking the time to join us online. Take care.